Research is proving that at least 50% of all goals that are set every single year has to do with one thing, and that is financial freedom. That is, most people wish to work from anywhere that they want in the world and not have to respond to any bosses at all. But one thing that you also need to know is the fact that only 8% of people who set these goals eventually see the realization of that goal. And that is, if you're to pick people at random, 100 people at random, only 8 people are likely going to see the realization of their financial goals. And that is why in today's video, I'm going to talk about the 7 things that you might be doing wrongly when it comes to setting savings goals and the subsequent pursuit and the attainment of same. And so if you're new here, my name is Nana. I hold a master's degree in business finance, and on this channel, we discuss everything personal finance and personal development. And so without further ado, we move to the first point and the thing that might be stopping you from saving, and that is the present bias. So most people tend to focus on instant gratification and not delayed gratification. And what that simply means is that we always prioritize in the interim the greatest form of satisfaction and the pleasure, and we don't care if that comes at the expense of whatever later consequences that we may likely have to face in the future. And that is simply because evolution has taught us as human beings to focus on one thing, and that is survival and not sustenance. So most people that lived in the prehistoric era, our forebears, did one thing. They focused on how to actually avoid danger and live in the present times, as opposed to having to make provision for the future. It wasn't until recently in our history and our evolution as human beings that we tend to actually prioritize delayed gratification. And so when it comes to setting financial goals and savings altogether, if you truly want to become financially wealthy and to sustain yourself financially, then there's one thing that you need to do, and that is to try as much as possible to sacrifice the interim pleasure and the satisfaction for the greater days that may come later. And that is what ultra rich tend to do so much. If you're to look at all the rich people out there, there's one thing that runs across, and that is the fact that they try as much as possible to subordinate every interest, and then they try to focus on the long term. They build things and assets for the long term. If you were to take someone like Warren Buffett, he actually had to invest for at least 50 years, that is 5 consistent decades, in the stock market before he was able to subsequently drive himself towards centi-billionaire status. And so that is not easy. When you're setting financial goals, there's one thing that you need to do. Try as much as possible and then ask yourself the simple question: what are the things that I'm currently willing to sacrifice in order to get a greater gain in the near future? That is to hit my financial goals. And if you're able to sit down and to ascertain all these things, then you're more likely going to save more and then attain your greater heights or your financial goals at the end of the year. This brings us to the second reason why you might be struggling to save, and that is frictionless payment equals frictionless spending. So one of the key things that you need to know is that if you truly want to stop a habit that you're not actually happy about, then there's one thing that you can do, and that is to increase the friction that is associated with that habit. In a like manner, if you truly want to continue to adopt a new habit, the easiest thing that you can do is to reduce friction that is associated with that habit. And so in this case, when it comes to our saving goals, what you have to do is that you need to try as much as possible to increase the friction that is associated with spending, and then reduce the friction that is associated with savings and investment. And the easiest way that you can do this is to try as much as possible to pay in cash, because once you actually tap and then go, it becomes much more easier for you to spend more. Research is actually proving that you're likely going to spend 10% more than your budget if you truly go out with contactless payment, as opposed to counterparts or people or respondents in the research that actually paid cash. And so one thing that you can do is to try and then limit your contactless payments, and that will subsequently ensure that you have enough left at the end of the month to save, and then more importantly, to invest. This brings us to the third reason why you might not be saving, and that is a scarcity mindset actually drains your mental bandwidth. So in 2013, a study was actually conducted on several farmers and of course people on average. And that study goes on to highlight the fact that when people usually are overburdened or they stress about their financial decisions, it makes them less likely to actually plan and to take decisions that are likely going to help them to achieve any other subsequent goals that they may have financially. And so one of the key things that you need to do is to try as much as possible to free yourself of that mental bandwidth. And the easiest way to do that is to automate several other payments and contributions that you may be making into, for instance, your emergency funds or probably any other investments that you may have. And that will subsequently ensure that your mind is freed up and it becomes much more innovative and it becomes much more creative, finding several other ways and means to increase your income and then more importantly, to cut down on unnecessary expenses altogether. This brings us to the fourth reason why you might not be saving, and that is the fact that vague goals equals vague results. So for most people out there, anytime that they set goals, they do not attach the necessary emotions to the goals, and then more importantly, they do not define the goals according to Napoleon Hill. And that is one of the ultimate reasons why most people fail when it comes to savings and the pursuit of whatever financial goal that they may have. And so, for instance, in this case, if we want to save £4,800 at the end of the year, the best way to actually go about it is to write this statement down. I will be happy now that I've actually gone on to save £4,800 by 31st of December 2025. So you've stated the goal and you've written it down clearly. Now ask yourself the next step and the next question, and that is, how will I actually break this goal down into tiny actionable steps? That makes it much more easier for me to actually attain it at the end of the year, and that is 31st December. So the easiest way to go about it is to break it down into months, or probably even into weeks. And so you know that every week you're probably having to save anywhere between 80 and 90 pounds at the end of every single week. Now once you've written that goal down and you've attached the emotions that is required for you to actually drive yourself to attain those goals, it becomes much more easier for you to actually go on to attain it. And so for instance, imagine you were to set this goal in this manner instead. Oh, I really want to save more this year. The question is, how much do you really want to save this year? You don't even know. What amount do you have to save weekly or probably even on a monthly basis to be able to reach that goal? Because the truth is, you don't even have anything at this point that you're driving yourself towards. And that is what makes it much more difficult for people to save, and then more importantly, to hit their financial goals. So sit down, try as much as possible to write your goal down, break it down into tiny actionable steps, and then attach, more importantly, emotions to the attainment of that goal. This brings us to the fifth reason why you're not saving, and that is you have to actually rely on willpower and not default. So one of the key reasons why people fail is simply because they subject every single decision when it comes to savings and their financial goals to themselves, in that they want to actually state and then try as much as possible to make tiny adjustments as time goes on. The best way to actually attain your goals when it comes to saving is to actually automate your savings, and that makes it much more easier in that it reduces that emotional barrier between you and your savings goal. So whether you like it or not, whether you're sick, whether you're happy, irrespective of whatever emotions that you may be going through, you're still going to contribute into that emergency fund or probably into that investment portfolio. And that makes sure that the human interface is actually reduced to the barest minimum. And that also ensures that you're taking several steps closer towards the attainment of your savings goals and your overall financial goals. This brings us to the sixth reason why you might probably not be saving as much, and that is you're actually hiding your prompts. So one of the key things that actually makes people fail when it comes to setting financial goals, and more importantly, savings, is simply because they resort to one thing, and that is what psychology calls the ostrich effect. So the ostrich effect is simply the point or a condition where you actually shy away from responsibilities, especially in this case, financial responsibilities, knowing very well that you're actually driving yourself away from your financial goals. So for example, you know very well that you've got to save £4,800, like we've stated earlier in the video. However, you go out on the weekend and then you spend so much, you overspend your budget, and then you go on to purchase things that might not be categorized as needs or wants, or things that are not entirely on your budget altogether. Now, when you know that you've done all these things, it becomes much more easier for you to shy away from them, in that you don't want to see your expenses or the notifications coming from your banking app when you come out of the club. And that is simply because it makes you feel guilty. So what people tend to do is that they shy away or they push that responsibility aside altogether. And that is what actually becomes a habit. And then in the long run, it eats them up, and then it helps them to build several other detrimental financial habits that actually goes on to prevent them from subsequent attainment of whatever goals that they set for themselves to attain financially. And so what you want to do instead is to try as much as possible and then put your notifications on, so that anytime that you contribute into your savings account or probably into an emergency account, what you have to know is that it gives you the prompt. And that also ensures that you have the right motivation, in that you see the things being done physically, and that also senses you up to consistently contribute marginally towards the attainment of your goals. In a like manner, when you spend so much and you get the notifications, you know that this is how much I've spent, this is how far I've drifted away from my financial goals, and more importantly, these are the things that I need to stop doing, or these are the measures that I actually have to adopt subsequently in order to make sure that I actually find myself still on track towards the pursuit and the subsequent attainment of my savings and my overall financial goals. This brings us to the seventh and the last reason why you might not be saving as much, and that is lifestyle inflation. So what that simply means is that you're actually spending more than you earn, and that is one of the conditions that actually leads several millions of people towards one thing, and that is financial detriment. So one of the key things that you want to know is that you want to live below your means. Try as much as possible to focus on just your needs, or probably even wants on the barest minimum. That also ensures that you would have enough left at the end of the month to save, and then more importantly, to invest. So try as much as possible to avoid the noise. Just try and then focus on your goals, and don't get yourself to succumb to the pressure that is going on social media, because nowadays it is much more easier for you to just tune in to any of the social media platforms and see several people making all the big purchases, going on vacation and all of that. If you're to focus on these waves, there's one thing that is likely going to happen. It may drag you out of your budget and lead you to overspend your budget. And so these are the things that you want to avoid. Try and then live below your means, and that will subsequently ensure that you save more and you invest more, which would also take you towards the attainment of your financial goals, and finally to join the only 8% of people who set financial goals and then subsequently attains them. And so if you found value with this video, kindly smash the like button and then consider subscribing. And so thank you for spending time with us, and see you in the next video.